academic calendar was not harmonized. So they resumed long before we did. And even when we came, they've already done their first semester exams. So in the process of them doing their first semester exams, he suddenly discovered that his admission that they helped him in doing was fake, that he wasn't a student. So he went back to the people who was helping him. They said to him, okay, Unimed did not work. We will get a change of university. You will go to Ekoma, and if they take you for any course, go ahead. So he came. But when he came, we had started our first semester exams. So when they came, they said to him, how on earth will you come by this time? That it's not done anywhere. Exams have started. The change cannot be effected. Go home. Go and write JAM again. Next year you can come back. So something said to him, no. He met someone on campus, and then he was asking that he heard that I was in the school. They said yes. He said where? They told him where I was living. He came to look for me. Now in the process of looking for me, he met us where we were having fellowship. And we were having a prayer meeting. He came in, he was sober. We finished praying. My father in the Lord asked him then and said to him, what is the issue? He told him the story and said, I'd gone to meet the registrar, and they said I should go home, that it can't happen because exams have started. We had started exams already. My father in the Lord stood up and looked at him in the face and said to him, go back to the registrar. Tell him that Jesus said you should be given admission. So he went back to the registrar. You know, when he said that, when they told him that I was in the room, I also shivered in fear, and I shook my head. I said, no, this is not consistent with reality. So he went back and got to the office of the registrar. Waited when he was installed, he got in. There were people there. He met the registrar. Then was a Yoruba man, Dr. Olawale, and said to him, yes, what do you want? He said, sir. He said, I came back because my father in the Lord, then he wasn't born again, but this was his encounter with Christ. He said, my father in the Lord said, I should say to you that Jesus said you should give me admission. Everybody erupted in laughter in the office. They laughed. Asked him again, who said? He said, Jesus said. They laughed and said to him, get out of the office. He got out of the office and stood by the door. After 10 minutes, the registrar opened and said, where's that boy? He was right by the door. He said, come in. He said, who said I should give you admission? He said, Jesus said. My registrar said to him, I am mere mortal. Who am I to say no when Jesus has said I should give you admission? He asked him, he said, what course would you want to read? He said, economics. He got the admission. When he came back, he gave his life to Christ. Today he's a pastor with Christ Embassy. We became roommates for 5 years in Ekoma, and we're still best of friends till today. Ladies and gentlemen, when he said to the registrar, Jesus said you should give me admission, the reason why they laughed was that it was not consistent with the reality of this world. I mean, there were things that were consistent. The process was there. Write your JAM, go through the process, go through the admission process. Admission letter will be given to you. You will be given matriculation letter, and then you will come in as every other person had come in. So this was their reality. But when he stepped in and said to them, Jesus said, it was not consistent with the reality that they understood. In Matthew chapter 9, Jesus was speaking with his disciples when Jairus lost his daughter, and suddenly he said to himself, let me meet him. He understood what the reality was, that the girl had died, but he said to Jesus, he said, my daughter had died, but I want you to come and wake her up. So he stood up and followed. While he was on his way to the house of Jairus, there was a woman that also had an alternative reality, who had suffered for 12 years. And in the midst of the multitude, she said to herself, if only I could touch the cloak of his garment. Meanwhile, there were people who had contacts with him, but there was a woman who had an alternative reality. So got in touch with him. She got healed. Jesus said, who touched me? Peter said, everyone. Multitudes are touching. He said, no, virtue had left me. He understood that there was someone who was operating in the same realm that he was operating. He looked back at the woman and said, go, that faith has made thee healed. He proceeded. When he got to the house of Jairus, verse 24, he said to those who were mourning, those who came, professional mourners who were playing flute, and said to them, get out. They must have wondered why. He said to them, for the girl is asleep, she's not there. They laughed. Again, it was not consistent with the reality of the people who were there. Because with man, death is the final bus stop of anything. So to meet a man who steps in and said to them, this is not death. I have come to wake her up. She's asleep. It was an alternate reality. Ladies and gentlemen, as Christians and believers, we must understand basically that our reality is not consistent with the reality of the world. We must come to understand that our reality is not consistent with what the system had created. And ladies and gentlemen, that is why every time you speak from the concept and the perspective of faith, it seems foolishness to the people of the world. Because the truth is, you are speaking out of their reality. Am I making sense at all? One of the biggest challenges that a lot of believers is facing today is that we want to fit into the system of the world, not understanding that we have a system that is not consistent with the system of the world. Our reality is the Word of God. And that there are some certain things that is not consistent with our reality. Number one, the word impossibility is not consistent with our God's reality. So Jesus said with men, these things can be impossible, but with God, all things are possible. That is our reality.